on me, if you'll be so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hi, everyone. This is Lori LeBay, and thank you so much for joining us here at Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I am the host and the founder of Alzheimer Speaks, which is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. And we believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations about dementia and how it affects us, that we will be able to remove some of the stigmas and help people continue to live purposeful and filled lives. At our core, we believe that collaboration is really the only way we're going to win this battle. And I have to thank each and every one of you. You see, you are the ones that got us named the #1 influencer online, according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz for Alzheimer's. And that happened, when you push out to your Twitter tribe, your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn colleagues, your Pinterest peeps. And the more information we can push out to our spheres, the more likely people are going to grab it when they need it. Because there are so many people, even in our own circles, who don't share what they're going through. It's still not a comfortable topic for many. So the more information, the better. So I would encourage you to continue to push this information out. And again, want to thank you for doing so. In addition, I always get asked, how can I be on the show? Who's on the show? And really, everybody is welcome to be on the show. We interview people with dementia. We interview families who have dealt with a loved one who is diagnosed. We have professionals in the industry. We've had Harvard research on the show. We've had movie directors, singers and songwriters who have written music, authors, you name it, advocates. Everybody's voice needs to be heard because it takes a village. It really takes a globe to shift our care culture from crisis to comfort. And I think doing that through talk radio by sharing stories, it just makes it so much easier to know that you're not alone, to know that other people are struggling and having the same types of joys, to ignite passion, to try something different because somebody else was brave enough to do it and to share it with you. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of colleagues. One is Dave with Calendar Cards, who has so graciously put together a directory for memory cafes around the U.S., and you can find that information if you go to alzheimerspeaks.com, go to our projects and initiatives page, and then scroll down to memory cafes. You'll be able to find where they are located. And for those of you that don't know what they are, they're a support group, or what I like to call a gathering of people with early memory loss and their care partners, where they can come together and really have a sense of community. The second organization is the Call Alert Center, which I can't say enough good things about. It is a very inexpensive way to protect your loved one in case of wandering. They also do alerts for pets, for college students, and for people who travel around the world, not just caregivers. But it's a great route to go, and just know you've got it in your pocket in case of an emergency, because we never know with dementia when someone is going to wander. Now, today's show is really kind of dear to my heart. We are going to be talking about the gifts wrapped in the disease of dementia. And we have Rick Naymark with us, who is a writer and a marketing consultant who lives right here in Edina, Minnesota. And he was the principal family member responsible for his mother's care during her 8.5-year journey with Alzheimer's. So I think a couple of things are going to come out interesting during this conversation. One is that we don't hear as much from the male caregiver. And two is, a lot of people don't talk about any gifts wrapped in this disease. And so I think it'll be a very fun conversation and an enlightening one. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Lori. Good to be here.
Well, let's start out. Can you give people a little bit of history? I mentioned that you cared for your mom for 8.5 years. How did your family come to terms with the diagnosis? Was that something that was easily accepted by all?
I think, as it commonly is, it was difficult to get everybody on board. My mother was married at the time and living in Phoenix, and she started to show symptoms, and they accelerated quickly. And I'm the only boy in the family, and I have 3 sisters. So getting all 4 of us together to decide a course of action was very difficult.
Are you all in the same part of the country, the siblings?
No, that complicated it. So my mother was in Phoenix, 2 of my sisters live in California, and then one lives in Minneapolis with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you get to be the ringleader of this whole journey?
I think my mother had ulterior motives. I think that she felt by giving me this responsibility, it would help me grow as a person, and it really did. Mm-hmm. So there's probably some secret thing she thought about. I was the only boy. We were very close, and she had fewer issues with me growing up than she did with her daughters, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. So
that was reversed in my family. No.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So she was in Phoenix, and she was starting to show these signs, and they were becoming worse rapidly. It started with simple things like Post-it notes all over the house, on drawers and cupboards and so on, saying what was inside. But then it quickly accelerated to really violent accusations of her husband, my stepfather, that he was stealing things because she couldn't remember where she put things. And then she started throwing things at him and hitting him. And he's a very mild-mannered person and was afraid, and also began to feel that she might wander off, that something could happen to her. So he started to feel that this was a bigger thing than he could handle. And that's when he reached out to us.
Wow, that had to be devastating. I mean, I know, my mom went through the accusation stage, and your heart just breaks because you're working your tail off to protect and give the best possible care. And it's like, really? You're going to accuse me of doing this? And I can't imagine what it must be like for a partner.
He made the first mistake, I think, that often people in this situation make, which is that he took it personally. Mm-hmm. And he thought that she was criticizing him, but she was just acting out as a person with Alzheimer's. And, one of the first things that was so helpful for me to realize is that those kinds of behaviors really had nothing to do with who my mother was.
Well, that's a lot of people can't make that separation. So that was the title of your book is Alzheimer's Gifts, how caring for someone with Alzheimer's brought unexpected blessings. And that really is a blessing to be able to make that separation. Because I think in life we take a lot of stuff personally that we probably shouldn't. We think it's about us.
Yes, and it's probably most often not about us. And her husband was, more old school, and it was difficult for him to make that transition. He more was feeling that this was something he could not handle anymore, the mm-hmm. stress of it. And actually, shortly after she moved up to Minneapolis and went under my care, he developed cancer. And I wonder if it was related. Mm-hmm. And then he died from that while she was in Alzheimer's care.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, in the stress of giving care, the stress, any type of stress, but we see that a lot with carers, that they end up getting physically ill and many times will die prior to, because they take on that burden. And there is, no matter how much you try to frame it, there's still a level of guilt that eats away at you in terms of, should I have done it this way, or should I have done it that way, or maybe we shouldn't have done it at all? You know, all of those questions that come into play because you feel like you're under a microscope. Everyone's kind of watching your situation, and everybody always has an opinion.
Yes.
Don't always want to help you, but they want to put their 2 cents into the ring, and that can add a lot of emotional and kind of mental burden.
Well, learning to manage expectations of my sisters was part of that emotional burden. But one of the gifts that I got from this whole experience was growing confidence that I was making the right decisions in partnership with the caregivers, and less reliance on my sister's critiques. So that helped me a lot.
Well, and that's huge to get to that space. And I hear it a lot, especially with long distance caregivers. A lot of times when we're in the trenches, we don't even look at them as caregivers because they're so far away. And from our day-to-day stuff, it doesn't seem like they're contributing much at all.
Right.
And that can really tend to be a battle, or people can't see. You know, if they're not there, they don't have the opportunity to see how much things have changed.
Yes.
And how it affects every interaction.
Yes. That definitely was the case, having 2 sisters. That one actually did not visit during the 8.5 years that my mother was in a residence, and the other one came maybe once a year for a while. So they really didn't understand what was going on.
How about your sister here locally?
She was a wonderful support.
Was she?
Yes, and we could trade off and manage time away, spell each other, share our experiences, and kind of work together through this whole thing. And I'm very much indebted to her, and my wife as well was very helpful.
Oh, that's wonderful. I had 2 brothers, but they were pretty much hands off, and both live locally. You know, one was retired, and so, you know, there were times I would go down the rabbit hole and kind of get angry, like, damn it, you have more time than anybody, and yet you won't lift a finger, you know. And but I learned, and again, this was a gift. I learned to let go of that and appreciate that's just who they were, where they were at in life, and I couldn't control it, and that was their decision. And by being angry at that, or allowing that to get to me where I thought that I had to change it, they had to see it from my side. They had to see the gifts. They had to see the love, that I was wasting time with my mom, you know, because I couldn't spend it with her because I was trying to fix them. And once I decided they don't need fixing. They are who they are. And I just can only lead by example. And that was a huge relief, you know, and it was like, boy, I wish someone would have taught me that one earlier on, because, you know, for me, it was a 30-year journey.
You know, I think what the biggest help I got was from a friend who said to me, you know, you didn't make your mother have Alzheimer's. So you're not responsible for fixing it. And I think that's when I started to let go of the guilt, and probably I started to let go of the expectations of my sisters. And I started to focus instead on how lucky I was to be present. And I know that sounds strange to anyone going through this, because it is difficult, and there are trying times. But there are, when I could focus on what was there rather than not on what wasn't there, I found lots still to hang on to and enjoy and cherish. Yeah.
It is funny when you're able to live through gratitude instead of attitude. You know, it looks different. You know, you're grateful for, I guess I sum it up as much smaller things, but they're so much more powerful. You know, it's not the big events that we all kind of dream about. You know, you're going to get to this level and that level and do this and do that. It's not about that. It's about this really intimate level of connection. And for me, and I don't know if you felt this through your journey, but, you know, to me, my mom's journey, I always tell people, is my biggest gift. And, you know, one of those biggest gifts was teaching me the multiple levels of unconditional love that I didn't know existed. I just thought, well, there's love and then there's unconditional love. And it's like, oh no, there's a lot of levels of unconditional love that you go through on this journey. And did you feel that at all?
Absolutely. I felt like I developed as a human being by going through this, becoming more compassionate and more patient. And, reprioritizing all the other things that were happening in life, things that happen daily were less important, whether I had certain kinds of clothes or certain sorts of accomplishments in the other world didn't matter so much as really understanding that connection.
Yep. Yeah, that's, I think it's a gift. When I speak and train around the country, I talk about this. I think the disease is here to teach us huge, beautiful life lessons. Because I don't think we've been listening too well. Just turn on the TV and you can see how distraught the world has become. And I think that there can be great peace with this disease. I was talking with an individual the other day, and his mom has dementia, and he was really struggling. He's like, oh, she sleeps a lot. And I said, let me ask you this. Do you think she's peaceful? He's like, yeah, I think she's really peaceful. I said, what more can you ask for? Isn't that really what we all want, is a contented heart? I said, that's a pretty beautiful place to be. And yet we live in this fast-paced world where we've got to be busy and we've got to be yapping, and no one's really listening. We're just yapping. Is that really where you want to be? Or is it really just to feel content and that life's okay? I found that for my mom, that I talk about, she's the safest place for me to go because I think she lost her ego. So there was no judgment anymore. Right. Now, there was a point where there was a lot of judgment in the progression of this disease, where even when you were talking about your mom's husband, he was being, she thought he was stealing or doing whatever. There can be a lot of judgment. But then once that phase goes, there's just this peacefulness that I found. And again, every person with this disease is a little bit different, but it's a pretty amazing space to get to.
The philosophers tell us that our goal in life should be to learn to live in the moment. They can only live in the moment. Yep. Because they can't remember anything about the past and they can't anticipate the future. Their mind doesn't work that way. So they can model that behavior of just being. Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Did you ever have the experience, because, and some of my listeners will think I'm wacky, but that's okay. But I really kind of had this belief that there were times where my mom would appear to be asleep, but I just think she was someplace else in space. She was so content, and she would have conversations with people that weren't there. To me, it was almost like she had crossed over. And, but yet she was so content. And a lot of times people say, oh, they're hallucinating. Oh, they're doing that. And it's like, but she's so peaceful.
I saw that sometimes in that my mother, I would come in and my mother into her room and she would say, I just saw your grandmother, so her mother, this morning. We had coffee together. Or she'd say, my husband just stopped by and we spent some time together. And of course, both had passed a long time ago, but it was a very real experience for her. And I wondered how much of that was true or how much was not true.
Yep. Yeah. I think for me, I found a peacefulness of, and maybe that was just how I dealt with it. There was a peacefulness of thinking that was possible.
Yeah, and that maybe one of the gifts of this disease is an ability to transcend from one world to the other. Nobody knows.
Yeah, yeah. I know with mine, she would come to me literally in dreams, and, especially towards the end when she was dying, at 2:00 in the morning, Lori, get up, you have to finish my obit. It's not going to be, she was very clear. And even after she passed, she would come to me and still does at moments. But just very powerful things that, and I wasn't there when she died because she told me I wasn't to be there, that she wanted to know that I would continue to speak and continue our work together. And so my family thought I was crazy because I was always the person to be there. But I was really at peace that I knew where she wanted me to be. And even when I was gone, she taught me just powerful lessons from the people that plopped in through my trip. It was like she had orchestrated this perfect thing where I didn't feel left out at all in her dying process. But yet my family was able to be more hands-on and in touch, which is something she always believed in. Even when I was younger, she would always take us to funerals, and her friends would say, "Oh, the kids shouldn't be there." And my mom was just like, "This is a normal part of life. People need to embrace this. They need to understand this. So we need to remove the fear." And I think even as she died, she still believed that very strongly and was still determined to teach.
I would say my mother never stopped being a mother. I remember I would go in to feed her, which was a wonderful experience to feed her, and sort of harken back to the fact that when I was a little baby, she fed me. Her biggest worry was because I would go there after work, and before I'd go home, she'd say, "Well, when are you going to eat? And will you take some of my food?" So she never stopped being a mother. Even
sweet.
at the height of her dementia, she was worried about me.
Wow. What made you decide to write this book? I always find that interesting. And then also, what made you decide to pick the title that you picked, Alzheimer's Gifts?
I think I needed to write the book for the very reason you've been saying, which is that to experience caring for someone with Alzheimer's is a spiritual thing that is very deep. And it affected me so profoundly after my mother died, I just couldn't walk away from it. And I also thought that the title of the book, Alzheimer's Gifts, is about a number of gifts that I felt I received by being present and hanging in there and being a caregiver to her. And when I went into this, I didn't expect that. I really expected this to be a long, hard slog. And so when I came out of it and realized how enriching it was and how much my mother had given me through this process, I felt if I could capture that and write that in a book, someone just starting the process would benefit from this. I wish I had this book when I had started with my mother to focus more on the positives than on the negatives. So that's how I decided to write the book and why I gave it that title.
Well, and I think so many of us that go through this journey, we want to put a hand out to the next guy and lift them up. Because it's scary. I mean, people don't get any information. I mean, when they go to the doctor, they'll get a prescription and a next appointment, but half the time they're not even referred to the Alzheimer's Association or the Alzheimer's Foundation or the Alzheimer's Society. I mean, even the big organizations, let alone all of the small pieces that are out there to connect to. And these, these pieces, like your book, I think are just so important on so many levels. I think one, that it was probably a healing process for you as well, and two, they lift others and they give them hope.
And I wanted to honor my mother, and record not only the wonderful things I saw and learned about her during this process, but put down a record of her life as well. So I had a lot of reasons for writing the book.
Well, in the book, and I just picked out a couple of spots, if you wouldn't mind talking about the gift of gumption. I love that. I love the title. And that's in chapter 8, the gift of gumption, the guts to carry the feet. And I just think that that's an interesting little story there.
Well, that relates to something we talked about a little earlier about being the only boy in a family with 3 sisters who all knew more than I did about how I should live my life. So I felt like I had 4 mothers. And so I grew up thinking that they all knew better than me. And I yet had the responsibility for my mother, and I had the ultimate authority to make decisions and the responsibility. And when I first deferred to my sisters, which was just natural for me to do, I got conflicting advice from them, and sometimes not helpful advice, sometimes advice that went counter to what the nurses would recommend. And I just reached a point where I thought, I'm going to stand up and be who I am and make my own decisions and stick by them. And so I got that gift of gumption from my mother, I feel, during this process. And I've continued to be that way with my sisters. Now, we get along fine. I think they respect me more.
Well, that is a true gift. I was going to ask you, how are your sisters doing with with the changed man before them?
Well, I think they're getting adjusted to me because I'm different than the person they knew. But I think they're also wish the best for me. So that's the gift of gumption.
So with your mom, you moved her back here. Can you tell people, did she move in with you? Did you move her into a memory care, or how did that process go?
Well, as you mentioned, every path is different, and the choices are many, and the decisions are difficult to make. We didn't understand the different stages of Alzheimer's and at what level she was and at what kind of care she might need. We didn't understand anything about the funding and the price tags and where the money would come from. We didn't know anything about how long this would last. And we didn't understand the community resources. I think like many people who suddenly have this happen in their family, we were just lost as to what to do. What we knew for sure were two things. First of all, that her husband could no longer care for her. This was down in Phoenix. And then secondly, as her guardian, it would be easier for me to make decisions if she were up here. So the first process was to bring her up here, Lori. And then the second was we felt that we had waited so long and she was far enough advanced that she could go into a residence. And then what we had to find out were that there were different types of memory care. And in her case, she could go into what was called, I think, assisted living memory care.
Okay.
And she progressed from that over several years into more nursing home memory care type situation. But when she first came up here, she was able to walk to a cafeteria for meals. She was able to toilet herself and walk to activities. But that eventually all went away. And then, so as she changed, her care situation had to change as well.
Which makes a lot of sense. And there are so many unknown pieces. I mean, it's just almost spooky.
It's spooky. And the hardest thing was to move from someone who had been raised by my mother to reverse the tables and be the one who had to care for her. So I had to get my mind around that while trying to make these decisions and move her into a place where she'd be well cared for and safe.
Well, and picking that out, that's no easy feat either.
No.
Because you don't know if what you're seeing is really what you're going to get.
My wife and I toured probably 15 care centers in Phoenix to come to the conclusion that wasn't a solution. And then we went to probably 15 different care centers in the Twin Cities before we arrived at the one that we selected.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a lot of afternoons and tours.
It sure is. Can you tell us, with your own mother, did you see personality changes? Because some people really have significant changes and others don't at all.
I think both. I saw that she became calmer as she went further into the disease. She actually became less critical and more positive.
Okay.
But one of the things that stayed the same was her sense of humor. She was very funny. She was very salty. And the caregivers used to get such a kick out of her, her expressions, which would embarrass me, but they thought was authentic and funny. So she loved to tease and she loved to flirt to the end.
Sounds like my mom.
Ah,
So she had a real good relationship too with those that worked for her. They just thought she was just precious. And but we hear sometimes of people's personalities. I mean, some people get really nice and they were kind of ornery, and families are like, gosh, I like this person. And other times, there'll be personalities where somebody was really soft and gentle and then gets more aggressive and things. So I was just curious, and a lot can depend on the type of dementia that
I
somebody
see.
has.
Yeah, and I saw all shades of that among the other residents. I saw some that would sit all day and moan or scream. But I also saw a lot of people who were content, or they wanted to do repetitive little things, and that kept them busy. I saw the range. But in terms of my mother, she always tried to be aware of what was going on, even though she couldn't express it. And she had that endearing sense of humor that the caregivers loved.
Which I just think of so many moments that I've seen with not just my mom, but with other people. It just touches your heart in a way that you can't even explain. And that sense of humor, I think, is so important, and yet so many people give that away. That ability that's like, this is serious work, and they're very task-minded, and people don't laugh, and laughing, it fills our bodies and our souls, and it actually changes the chemistry, in which our body works off of. And so I think it's a real critical piece to try to maintain. And yet it's hard for some people to let go of the seriousness and just adapt to this is the life as we know it now.
Yeah. And the other thing that I noticed about all the residents, no matter what stage they were in, is they really wanted to be treated like human beings. They wanted to be normal as they could be. They really liked it when I would say hi to them or know their name. So I think that's a basic human need.
Yeah.
And it's easy for people to look at them people who aren't used to Alzheimer's and think they're diminished, but in many ways they're still human.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very much so. And even though they might not be able to speak or interact, they're still reading all the nonverbals that are going on around.
Yes.
And so many times I think people think, well, if they can't speak, they can't hear, they can't see. Well, that's not the way it works. And so they will have reactions to things, and people think that it's really strange. Oh, they're having a behavior. And it's like, well, no, we kind of caused that behavior by what we said or did in front of them that wasn't appropriate. And I think we have a lot of teaching to do on that yet.
Yes.
On that yet. You wrote that you visited your mother 3 times a week. Did you have a reason for, that number? And did you hold to that pretty stiff and heavy? Or was that just, I'm going to try for that and we'll see what happens? How did that work?
I did do that. I stayed with her 3 times a week, and I did it primarily because I felt that the more interest I showed in her and the more present I was, the better care she would get. I don't know if that's true, but when all the caregivers saw me around and I could help them or ask them questions, I think they paid particular attention to my mother. So I kind of had an ulterior motive. Also, things would change often. She got pneumonia once. She would get skin tears, and her health would change. It would be variable a lot during even the course of a week. And so I wanted to know what was going on and see it with my own eyes. Maybe I was too compulsive, I don't know, but I did go there quite often. I saw her because of this disease thousands of times more than I would ever have seen her had she lived a normal life in Phoenix.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have many friends who have told me that they were jealous of my relationship with my mom because I was so close to her. And yet it was because of the disease, because if she was healthy, there wouldn't have been a need to connect on that level,
Right.
or there wouldn't have been a seen need. I think we can all grow, by more contact, but we're in that, kind of escalator ramp that's just taking us all over the place, and we don't slow down enough to say what really fills us, what really makes us feel good, what really makes the other person feel full and valued. We don't ask those questions, and I think that that's a really sad statement to our society as a whole.
And a lot about my visits were absolutely that, Lori. They were about slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
So I would come in with 1,000 things on my mind and a big list of things I had yet to do that day. And there was my mother sitting in a wheelchair, very quiet, and maybe about to eat dinner or something like that, something very simple, or just listening to music. And I would see people come in and be very impatient. I would notice on the logs where they would sign in and sign out that they were there maybe 10 minutes at most.
Mm-hmm.
But I would work hard to just, be with her and slow down to her level. And I did it for her, but I also did it for myself. It was like a meditation.
Yeah, I found it challenging in the beginning to turn my phone and my pager off. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to wither up and die, because you're so attached
Yes.
to all that stuff. And then it was just like, wow, the world's still spinning, this is okay. And then I got to the point where, I don't have to have this angst, but it took a while to get rid of that. It was kind of like going on vacation where you gear up and then you're on vacation and you're still geared up from all you did. And then you finally get in that zone where you relax. And then it's 2 days before you got to go. And you're like, then you get all anxious of all the stuff that's going to be on your desk that you have to do. And just learning to really, like you said, be in the moment and not worry about the past, not worry about the future, because they're not in your control. And no, life goes on. It will be okay. So just make the best of what you have before you. And living in that row of gratitude, I think really allows you to be able to feel those gifts, and they're so simple, and yet they're so overlooked in the everyday life.
Yes, that was my experience.
Wow. You also say in your book that a lot of times, caregivers can look at this as a burden or a blessing. And how did you switch your feeling from kind of the hardship of the responsibility, because it's real, to actually being able to be grateful?
I don't know how that happened or when that happened. It was probably a couple years into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I began to feel that this was going to go on for a long time, and that I could make a choice. I could look for the bright side, or I could dwell on the hardship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was just, I wish I could explain to you how my mind flipped, what made that switch happen. And I don't know if I can fully explain it, but it was a conscious decision to start looking for the positives in this experience. It wasn't going to go away. She was very physically healthy. She was going to live a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't going to wish that she die. I just couldn't do that from my own moral sense. So I wanted to stop fighting it and accept it. And I don't know how I got there. Talking to people maybe,
Mm-hmm.
Expressing all my concerns and listening to myself, and then realizing that I wasn't helping myself or my mother by being negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't really pinpoint the moment for me either where it switched. It just happened. And I don't think I even really recognized it. I had other people, I was in real estate at the time, but I had other people who told me, boy, you really have a positive spin. And I didn't even know that there was another way, for the most part. I mean, I knew there were times that I was down and frustrated, But I always grew. I was born and raised in a family where you make the best of what you have, and you always try to make it better. And that was kind of the core of who my mom was, and same with my dad. And so to me, it was just kind of a natural thing. But I was shocked at how many people weren't able to get into that space. That they just looked at it truly as a burden. And, and I don't think any of us would like sign up and say, hey, I'll take this on, because it's not a pretty job description, unless somebody digs deeper like you have with your book, the Alzheimer's Gifts. But that's typically not in the job description. People don't talk about the benefits. They talk about the losses. They talk about the exhaustion, the lack of resources, the lack of services, the lack of support from family and friends. I mean, that's typically, what most people spin in. And yet there's such profound beauty in the disease if we just allow it to be there. Because like you said, we can't change it. We're not getting rid of it. Right. And there's, no cure in sight, probably for many years yet. And honestly, how can they have a cure when they don't know what causes it yet? So we have to learn to live graciously alongside it and with it.
I think there's, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking there were maybe two influences that helped change my perspective. One was watching the caregivers. Mm-hmm. In this case, these were people primarily from Africa, mm-hmm. different countries in Africa, and were probably not paid a lot of money, mm-hmm. yet their graciousness with the residents, their caring, their patience, their sweetness was so inspiring to me. And then the other thing that influenced me was seeing some of the other family members of other residents who would be so patient and loving with the person. In particular, I would see there was a man who came to visit his wife who I think maybe had had a stroke. Maybe she had Alzheimer's and then a stroke. But she was on a wheelchair that kind of looked like a gurney. Mm-hmm. So she was lying almost horizontal. And I didn't see an expression on her face for the 3 or 4 years that I would see her. But he was there every day and he would read a book to her. And I was so inspired by him. And I thought, he has something inside him that I want. Mm-hmm. And experiences like that, and also, seeing the staff be so sweet, inspired me to focus on the positive.
Well, and I think, that's one of the things with Alzheimer's Speaks and the different initiatives that we have is we really try to lead by example. Even with our guests on the radio, it's about leading by example. It's about telling stories. It's about saying, it's possible. We can make this better. And it's not going to be perfect all the time. But you know what? Look at your life prior to dementia hitting. It wasn't. So why do you think it has to be perfect now? It's about making the most out of the experiences before you. One of the things I talk about a lot, and I know my audience has heard me say this, but I don't think I can say it enough, is one of the things that I learned to ask myself on this journey, especially when I would get frustrated, was what is the lesson? And when I, finally started asking what is the lesson, I learned the lesson. I mean, it came to me, but it was so kind of stupid and simple at the same time. Is like you're only gonna find what you look for. So if you're gonna look for doom and gloom, you're gonna find doom and gloom. If you're gonna look for the lesson, or if you're gonna look for the joy, you'll find it. But you're only gonna find what it is you want to find, and that's that is something we all know instinctively, but few people really practice, I think.
I think so too. And, my mother became so helpless I couldn't. I just felt an obligation to look out for her, just as I would for a baby.
Yeah, that vulnerability.
Yeah, she was so vulnerable.
Somebody needs to protect and honor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and appreciate. There was another part in your book here, and I thought this was an interesting one that not everybody would probably think of. The gift of unique but familiar smells. Can you share that with us?
Well, as an English major years ago, I remember reading this book by Marcel Proust. And it's called Remembrance of Things Past. And what his point was is that when he was a little boy, his mother used to give him these Madeleine cakes dipped in tea. And as an adult, whenever he would taste one, the taste and the smell would bring him back to his childhood.
Sure.
So smells have that ability to transport us. Well, anyone who's been in a facility with Alzheimer's patients knows this smell. It's a signature smell. And I don't know that I can fully describe it except to say that it's a combination of that perfume that they use in Depends and urine and food spilled on the floor and gone stale and Lysol cleaning that comes after that, all mushed together. And it assaulted my nostrils the minute I got off the elevator on that floor. But the gift to me was that was a signature of that life experience for both my mother and myself. And I came to appreciate it as kind of a marker for my own growth and for her. And so it was a gift.
Okay. Because I think a lot of times people have preconceptions of what a nursing home or a memory unit's going to look like, smell like, and it keeps people away. I mean, I had a friend of my mom's who for 10 years couldn't go visit her because she just couldn't. It triggered too many things for her. And, the sense of smell is just as powerful as the sense of music.
Yes.
It's attached to a memory deep in our souls. And I also remember a time when my mom was eating corn on the cob. Now, my mom had all chipped and broken teeth, and, I asked her, do you want me to cut that off the cob? And she looked at me like I was an absolute imbecile for asking her that question. And she just sat and sucked and nibbled that corn on the cob. And I just remember watching her with such great joy. She was just in this, I don't know where she was, what memory it triggered, but she was so peaceful, so happy. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I want what she has. I just want what she has. Because she was so content and so filled, and that's silly over eating a piece of corn on the cob.
But it's true, and you mentioned music is the same sort of thing that somehow lodges in our brain, and I noticed that Alzheimer's doesn't touch that part of the brain. So it's very strange. Like my mother came to a place where she could not finish a sentence. She could maybe say 2 words and then would forget her thought. But if you asked her to recite the lyrics to an old tune she knew, she could say them all.
Yep. Yeah. Usually that's the very last part of the brain to get attacked. My mom was the same way. She could sing a song, and then even after her words left her, her toes and her hands were tapping, and she smiled. She had the glint in her eye. She'd pop a few words out every now and then, but she was totally connected,
Yeah.
and very joyful. Yet others could look at her and say, oh, she doesn't look the way she used to, and she's not, her hair's not done, and this and that. And I just remember a real profound incident in terms of sharing a photo that was actually with a musician. And my mom, to me, it was a picture of pure joy. But to my mother's friend, she screamed out. She was disgusted. She thought I was taking better care of her. And my mom looked horrible, and how could I let this happen? And I just remember saying, thank you. She's like, thank you? What are you thanking me for? I'm like, because I don't see what you see, and I did not know that until this moment. And then I told her what I saw, the joy, the glint in her eyes, the dimples, that when I look at that picture, I hear her, laughing, and I can feel her smile in my heart. My mom, it was one of those moments that, and my mom was always a joyful person, but it was probably one of the most profound moments of joy with my mom. And yet this very close friend who couldn't come visit, and, not to blame her on that, couldn't see that, And
I had many experiences like that where her old friends or relatives would want to see her and maybe hadn't seen her for years. And I had mixed feelings about it because I saw usually what happened. They would expect her to recognize them.
Yep.
And she wouldn't, and that would discourage them. And they would be shocked at how she looked.
Yep.
But that wasn't the person I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had exactly that same experience.
Yeah, and it made me realize how judging we are as a society, as a community, even amongst family and friends. And it just really made me step back and go, wow, we got a long ways to go. We got a long, long ways to go. I want to touch on one more part in your book, and it's preparing for and experiencing death, the gift of slow passage. Can you talk a little bit about that as we wrap up here?
My mother deteriorated over time, and I would say the last 6 months were more steady. In the last maybe 2 months, the nurses said, your mother's starting to lose weight, and that's concerning to us. And I think from then on, that the last 2 months, she followed a pretty normal progression toward death. And the first thing I was appreciative for is that my father died suddenly of a heart attack. He was quite young. And I was never able to say goodbye. I wasn't able to be there with him when that happened. And I regretted that. But with my mother, I could be there because I sort of called it death in slow motion. She, she was atrophying in a way. She was losing weight, becoming smaller, and was less alert, and was eventually bedridden. But as she was going through these stages, I could be there and experience that with her, and I really felt like she was teaching me how to get ready for my own death. And, what a gift. I mean, the ultimate gift. And when she actually died, it was peaceful. She just stopped breathing. And I was there. I expected angels to appear out of heaven and bells to sound, but it was just so quiet and peaceful. And then it was Christmas of all times. I felt like she almost timed it that way. But I was just so grateful. It was a gift to be able to experience it and to be present. I think when I was younger, I'd run away from that kind of situation. And she was giving me one more chance to show up.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing the power of connections. When my mom died, like I said, I was out of town, and I knew she didn't want me there. She wanted my family to experience the death process. And my daughter really kind of was the ringleader, not my brothers. And I could guide them via video because I could see things that were happening, but they could physically do them, which was pretty cool. But I remember, her telling me again in a dream that I need to know that you're going to continue this work. This is big work that we've done together. And we thought she was going to die. I mean, one time right before I went on stage, we were doing last rites, and 20 minutes later I'm up on the stage, and I called as soon as I got off, and I said, how's she doing? And they said, Mom, it was the weirdest thing. She's like, Grandma's body just heated up and she got beat red right after your call. And she said she calmed down about 10 minutes before you called. And I said, well, that's probably about the time I was done. And she's like, Mom, everyone in the room she was with you. They just all firmly, and that for my family, that's a real far reach for them to say that.
Uh-huh.
But there was like no other explanation to that. And they had been with her for, probably 3 days and had never seen that before. And then she ended up, passing a little later that night. And, it takes, I think with dementia, it takes so much energy for them to adapt and partake. And probably at the end of life, it's still the same. It takes a lot of bodily energy to participate, and they're just participating at a different level. And I love the lessons in your book and your ability to share those gifts with people. So I can't thank you enough, Rick, for being with us. Now, I know your book is available on Amazon, and you also have a website, though, too.
Well, I have actually. I don't have a website, but I've created an easy-to-remember link to the Amazon listing.
Okay.
And it's www.tinyurl.com/Alzheimer's Gifts, and that's the name of the book, Alzheimer's Gifts, and that would take you right to Amazon, where you could buy the book if you wanted to.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, this has just been a pleasure, and I can't wait to share your book. I'd love to see this in the libraries. Have you talked with any of the librarians at all?
It's on my schedule to do that.
Okay.
Especially where I live.
Okay.
Yes.
Because Roseville and Shoreview and Maplewood are really becoming more dementia friendly.
Okay.
In fact, in Shoreview, they're going to start kicking off having packets that people can pick up from the library, something for the care partner and something for the person with dementia, kind of activity packets and different things. So I know that they would be very much interested in your book, and we'll definitely help raise the profile of this and help others see the blessing wrapped in dementia.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, thank you. For those of you that are new to our show here at Alive and Social, you might want to check out one of my favorite shows, which is called What's for Dinner Tonight? And that's with Rachel Perrin, who is the culinary director of Kowalski's Market. And Rachel and her sidekick, Adam Lee, have different people on who talk about just all kinds of kind of food fantastic ideas, seasonal flavors, menus, nutritional topics, anything kind of yummy for your tummy. And you can actually go to Kowalskis.com. That's KOWALSKIS.com and find out some seasonal, menu suggestions. Their podcasts are only like 10 to 15 minutes long, so you'll pick up a lot in a short period of time. I would also encourage you, if you're new to Alzheimer Speaks Radio, we've been doing this for many, many years. So there are lots of old episodes that you can go back and listen to at any time. We also do what's called Dementia Chats, which is a video interview that I conduct with people with dementia, and they really are our true experts, and they just have some wonderful insights. For those of you that are interested in seeing a screening of His Neighbor Phil, which is a Hollywood film, I will be showing that January 26th in Vadnais Heights, Minnesota. I will also be in Indiana on February 13th and in a couple of cities in Illinois on the 14th and 15th. Then I'll be back in Woodbury, Minnesota in March with that, and we always have more coming online. If you're interested in being a host, please reach out to me. You can just shoot me an email at Lori@alzheimerspeaks.com, and I would be glad to touch base with you on that, or maybe you have a conference and are in need of a keynote or breakout sessions. I also do that as well. Don't forget to check out the Memory Cafe directory. You can find that on alzheimerspeaks.com, and then go to our projects and initiatives page and just click on Memory Cafes. You'll be able to find the closest one to your location. And also the Call Alert Center, which is a great help for caregivers who are worried about somebody who might be wandering as well. And you can find that right on our homepage too. Until next week, you have a blessed time, and we will talk soon. Thanks, everybody.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sylvester here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.